There are many possibilities being talked about for the upcoming college football season amid the pandemic. Some ideas to surface include playing a shortened season, playing in front of no fans, even possibly pushing the season to the spring. We've moved a bunch of stuff around because we had such a heated and interesting conversation with this group earlier this morning, and we only scratched the surface of some of the subjects. So on your screen, you see Paul Finebaum, Booger McFarland, and Laura Rutledge, who I'll start with you, Laura. If you could, let's just sort of put on the table for everybody who was not with us an hour ago, what is at stake here for the cancellation of a college football season? What is at stake for everybody involved?
Well, first of all, let's start with the money, because if we're talking about what's really at stake here, it's over $4 billion in revenue for the fiscal year of just the 50 plus public universities in Power Five conferences. So it's even more than that number, but that just talks about the public universities. And when you're looking at revenue and how it's generated in college athletics, so much of it begins with college football. It's more revenue than 35 of the next sports that come behind him, including college basketball, which is much further behind. So obviously football fuels everything. And when you look at college football as opposed to the NFL, in the NFL, maybe about 15 to 16% of their revenue comes from attendance. In college, it's double that, if not more, depending on which institution you're talking about. So it is crucial for these college football games to be played with fans. And that's why right now, as all of these guys are putting their heads together, men and women across college football, college athletics, they're saying, how can we make this work to have fans in the stands so that it's best for not only football and the revenue generated there, but the rest of the sports and the universities as a whole.
Okay, so that's everything that's on the table. Excellent. Paul, let me come back to you then, because the notion of amateurism is something that we and everyone have talked about for such a long time. As far as you're concerned, what hangs in the balance relative to that as these decisions get made?
Well, I think the credibility of the sport hangs in the balance, Mike. If we have a season starting in September or whenever without students on campus or fans in the stands, then there can be no president or commissioner ever stand in front of a group of people again and try to claim that this is amateur athletics. It would be shattered, and you would just have to just go ahead and pay the players and let them play. At least they're taking risks for money as opposed to for the good of good old Notre Dame. Now, the other side of it is if you play with people in the stands and you have to end the season early because the pandemic comes back, then you face the consequences of that. But in some ways, they're damned if they do, if they're damned if they don't. And if you move to spring, you shatter the myth of the normal calendar with basketball.
I'll get to spring in just a second, but Booger, let me just come to you as a former player and a great player at LSU, ultimately a first-round pick in the NFL draft. If you were playing now and they said to you, the schools aren't going to be open, the students aren't going to be there, the fans aren't going to be in the stands, but we want you to come out here and play, what would you say?
Why am I here then? Because I'm a student athlete, right? I mean, that's what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a student athlete, but now I got to come out and play just because everybody wants to fatten their pocket and put the money there. And I get it, guys. I understand the economic impact of football. I get it. It's been a fabric, a part of my life for a long time. But at some point, I just think smarter minds need to understand that, guess what? We're struggling right now from a money standpoint, and we may continue to struggle. And so for all the energy and the time and the effort everybody is putting into what model can we come up with to play football, how about putting that time and energy and effort and coming up with an economic model that if we don't have football, what if football can't be played in the fall? Everybody's painting this doom and gloom picture as if football and collegiate institutions are gonna end. That's not the case. We will figure out a way. We are the smartest country in the world. And I just think at some point, from a human safety standpoint, we have to start to get a grip that, guess what? If fans are not in the stands, and Laura, to your point about the attendance and the attendance that can't take place, guess what, guys? We're saving lives. I'll be damned about the money. We are saving lives, and at some point we have to focus on that and not so much the economic impact that it's having on LSU, Ohio State, or Florida.
That's an important piece in all of this, obviously the most important piece. Now, Laura, let me come back to you here because the scheduling then becomes significant, because we may be living in a very different world in September than we are in January or in March. We keep hearing the notion that the sport could move its season to the spring. What does that look like?
Well, first of all, just go ahead and say that all of these conference commissioners are trying as hard as they can to make sure that the season starts on time. And I talked to one yesterday who said, look, we're still planning for football to start in the fall, but I think we have to be realistic about this. So let's talk about what that spring schedule would maybe look like. And none of this is being discussed as any sort of hard and fast rule, but this is just an idea. Let's say it begins in February. You get players back on campus sometime around January, and you're able to give them that 6-week time period that most coaches say they would need to get ready. Then you do a shortened season, maybe only conference play, where you go through May, early May, maybe even a little bit less than that. But that allows for bye weeks, the things that you would need to make sure that players would be safe during that time. Then, if you are a team that makes it to the college football playoff, the most games you would play would be about 12 games in all of that. And look, one of the main things here is that a lot of these people are saying that way we would know in a full weather cycle, what does the virus do? We would have so much more information by that point. Hopefully, testing that would be available to masses, hopefully, an ability to protect the fans in the stadium, protect first and foremost the players, the coaches, their health and safety. And that's what they're trying to look at, trying to do. And I'll reiterate one more thing here as we open this up to all the questions that may come through this. They cannot start a season and end it. That would be catastrophic. They also cannot afford for the viability of the sport in the standpoint and other sports long term. They cannot afford to not have football. If they can do anything possible to have it in this calendar year, in this fiscal year, and in this academic year, they're going to be trying to do that. And I think that's where this spring idea really comes into play.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.